everyone, I'm here today with a late May reading wrap-up. Memorial Day kind of got in the way, but I did read 5 books, kind of. Starting with the first book in Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, which I finished in May but actually started way back in January. I have been reading this one kind of in addition to whatever I'm actually actively currently reading, and just reading like a couple pages a day. This is a book that I've tried to read several times in my life. I've also tried to read The Hobbit. The furthest I ever got was to the Gollum scene, and then they were going back into the woods after the Gollum scene, and I just couldn't. It was just so boring. But Lord of the Rings, I had never really made much of an attempt, but I got this from a friend recently. I watched Rings of Power back in December and did like a full Hobbit and Lord of the Rings rewatch, and so it just was finally time to actually read it. And so I just knew going in that I wasn't gonna be capable of actually just reading it straight through. It was just gonna be too boring, too much of a commitment. And so right away I was like, I'm just gonna read a couple pages a day in addition to other books. And it wasn't as boring as I thought it would be, but I am still glad that I'm reading it this way, just a little bit at a time. And it is interesting to see how it compares to the movies. Obviously, I like the movies more. I love the movies, have been obsessed with the movies for most of my life, but still always fun to see the source material. I've been having fun marking where all the songs and poems are. I have now started The Two Towers. In another 4 or 5 months, perhaps I'll be talking about that one. So yes, can finally say that I have read Lord of the Rings, even if it did take 4 or 5 months. After that, I read Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. And this was one of the last books remaining from my 5-star TBR prediction tour that I did, I think 2 years ago. And I thought this one would be 5 stars because it sounded very similar to Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, which is one of my favorite books of all time. In Fangirl, the main character is writing fan fiction about a series that's kind of an amalgamation of Percy Jackson and Harry Potter, and she's an introvert who's kind of dealing with college as a freshman and her first ever romance. And then Eliza and Her Monsters is a webcomic writer who is also very introverted and also dealing with her first romance, which happens to be with the biggest fanfiction writer of her webcomic. So very similar premises, so I had very high hopes, and I'm happy to say that they were well placed high hopes. This was indeed a 5-star read for me. Very similar vibes to Fangirl, so if you enjoy Fangirl, totally recommend Eliza, or if you like Eliza, definitely recommend Fangirl. And in this one, there are actually 2 fictional stories that get talked about. Obviously, our main character's webcomic is talked about a lot, but then also our main character is a big fan of this unfinished fantasy series. And honestly, that was the fictional work that sounded more interesting to me. I would totally rather read Children of Hypnos than our main character's webcomic, I think. The part where Wallace reads the Children of Hypnos and he gets to the final book that has been published since it is unfinished and texts our main character all mad that it's an unfinished series totally gave me The Fault in Our Stars vibes, with the part where Augustus is mad about the ending of Hazel's favorite book. So yeah, just overall lots of really great fandom vibes in this book. I really enjoyed the romance in this one. I think I enjoyed the romance in this one better than the romance in Fangirl, although Fangirl still holds a very personal place in my heart. I also liked the relationship with her parents. At times it was a little bit overly antagonistic, but I just really liked the representation of the parents just not understanding her level of introversion. It seemed very realistic to me how they were, worried about the fact that she doesn't have very many friends and stuff. And yeah, just overall enjoyed this one a lot. I enjoyed the characters and the dynamics and the fandom, and it definitely lived up to its 5-star prediction. And then after that, I read the entire Children of Eden series. I got this one from my husband for Christmas 2 years ago, I think, and I had wanted it for a long time, ever since I first saw the very beautiful cover, and then also It was clearly a dystopian, which I love dystopian, and it took place in a place called Eden, which is the same thing that a place in my favorite dystopian of all time is called. So it just had kind of a lot going for it to be intriguing. The only thing that worried me is that I knew it was a YouTuber book, which I know can be kind of hit and miss. And indeed, I will say it was not super high quality. The writing at times is very melodramatic. Some of the stuff just doesn't quite add up in my mind. In this world, there's a very strict population control law in which people can only have one child, which also intrigued me. I think it's an interesting topic, considering how overpopulated the world is. But a lot of it just didn't really add up. Like, they're very strict about this, but don't seem to be tracking, like, anyone's use of food or any other necessities. It did also have, like, some just really terrible futuristic lingo. Like, there was one curse word that was just a catch-all for everything, and it was just weird. And, like, to me, the futuristic lingo in a dystopian, I love. I love getting, or even in like fantasy books, I just love lingo that is like unique to the universe, and this was bad. Although I did like all of the nature names. All of the characters have names that are very like nature based, because in this world, humans have like obliterated everything. The only thing that exists is like humans and not mold, but like lichen and stuff. And so everyone, because nature just does not exist anymore, very much worships the idea of nature. And so all the character names are like trees and animals and stuff, which I liked that detail. But other than that, all of the like lingo and stuff was terrible. And overall, the world just felt too similar to our own still, considering how vastly it is different. Like, I feel like in this world, something would have been invented other than capitalism. Again, there are no consumption restrictions to be seen other than you just can't have more than one kid. And overall, the themes were just very like mixed messagey. They weren't all bad, but they just weren't, I think, explored very well. It was definitely a mixed bag. It was entertaining enough. I read the entire series, but I wouldn't say it was quality. This first one did give me some City of Ember vibes though, which is more of like a middle grade dystopian that I liked as a kid. But anyways, after that I read Elites of Eden, which gave me major Pretties vibes by Scott Westerfeld, the second book in the Uglies series. And in this one I would say the quality of the writing did go down a bit. But again, it still was entertaining enough. I finished it and I went on to the third book. And yeah, other than that, I don't have much to say about this one. Our main character has kind of forgotten who she is and needs to be reminded by the rebel forces. Very Pretties-like. A lot of things in the series kind of seemed not like it was plagiarizing or anything by any means, but definitely I could see elements of other big dystopians here and there throughout the series. So then finally I read Rebels of Eden, which again, it just, as the series went on, the inconsistencies increased. There's this giant desert surrounding Eden that people apparently cannot get through to the other side, spoiler alert, to find out that the outside world is in fact still alive. Except when they can, like, and there's no explanation. Sometimes people literally die out in this desert, other times people get through basically fine, and then other times they get through just barely. This one had a lot of typos. That's a very nitpicky thing, but it just had a lot more typos than the first two. And then also in this one, it just became harder and harder to ignore the character inconsistencies as well. Like, a character's emotions would change so fast, their opinions on things would change so fast, just complete 180s from one paragraph to the next. So yeah, once again, I read the whole thing. It was entertaining enough to keep going and just ignore the bad writing and the inconsistencies and stuff, but definitely not a great series. But if you're just like really hankering for just kind of a silly YA dystopia, it fits the ticket. I do think I'm probably gonna get rid of these because they weren't very good, But I will be very sad to part with these covers. These are the most beautiful covers I've ever seen. If I was keeping these would be like in my top 5 book covers on my entire bookshelves. This like fluorescent-y, neon-y color scheme is totally my vibe. But alas, I don't think I should hang on to them just because the covers are really pretty. So yeah, those are all of the books that I read in May. I'll be continuing with Lord of the Rings throughout the year. I'm hoping to finish all 3 within a single year, but we shall see. Let me know down below what you read in May. I hope you enjoyed watching. Remember, words matter.